Stephanie Dray, who I'm so happy to call one of my friends, is a New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and USA Today best-selling author of historical fiction. Her award-winning work has been translated into many languages and tops lists for the most anticipated reads of the year. She lives right here in Maryland, greatest state in the country. She will be presenting A Founding Mother, a book about Abigail Adams, wife of John Adams, and a fascinating person in her own right. This book is a perfect read for reading during the 250th birthday celebration for the United States this year. Jeffrey Dale Lofton will be interviewing Stephanie. He is a senior advisor at the Library of Congress, which sounds like a dream job. Absolutely a dream job. And he is also the author of Red Clay Susie. Enough of me talking. Let's get to the interview. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. And thanks to all of you for being here. This very first session, time slot of the day. We're glad you chose us. And I'm just so excited to be back at the Gaithersburg Book Festival. It feels like a family, you know, authors and readers and the people who put the program on and just the whole community. And I am so excited to be here with Stephanie Dray. And I'm going to add to the bio. What you didn't know is that author Michelle Moran said that there is no finer writer of American women in history than Stephanie Dray.
And I did not pay her to say that.
No, you just wrote very well, many books. And I think this is because Stephanie believes that writing and reading historical fiction is essentially an act of empathy, something that we need more of in today's world. So thank you for doing what you do, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. This is my fourth or fifth time back. I love the Gaithersburg Book Festival. I've watched it grow up and get bigger and bigger, and I've seen the hard work that the staff puts into it, and also the way the community turns out to support it. So I'm getting a little verklempt just talking about it. But thank you. This is really a wonderful way to return.
Great. Well, let's start, okay? So I guess to start off, it's best if you'll just tell us about your latest book, which you wrote with Laura Camoy. Yes. Or maybe who is it about is a better question.
So A Founding Mother is about a little-known founding mother named Abigail Adams. Some of you may have heard of her. She was married to President John Adams, and she was the mother of John Quincy Adams. And she was really a patriot in her own right, which made her really exciting to write about. She was from Massachusetts. She started off during the Revolution as a young mother, an ardent patriot. She eventually became our First Lady, and then really was our most influential founding mother. So that's why we thought this book title fit her more than any other American woman.
Great. So she lived during the early 1800s, and she had a rather modern point of view. Will you tell us what made her so extraordinary, and especially for the time that she lived in?
So she was coming of age in the late 1700s, and at the outbreak of the war, she was very caught up in the cause, as was her husband. But Abigail really was able to process all of the talk about independence and freedom and all men being created equal in a way that maybe her husband was not so appreciative. And so she has a very famous letter in March, I believe 31st of 1776, where she wrote to her husband and she said, "Remember the ladies when you're making these new laws for a new country." And that quote is relatively famous, but what people don't know is that she went on to say much more. She said, "If you don't remember the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion because we will not hold ourselves bound by any law in which we have no voice or representation," which is an absolutely astonishing thing for somebody in the 18th century to say, a woman, for her to say that. She had internalized all the philosophy of the Enlightenment and all the ideals that the founders were boasting about, and she thought, I think that might apply to me and to women and also to black people and enslaved people. So I'm not sure why she was able to sort of see more broadly than many of the other founding figures, but she did see more broadly than they did, and that really made her a compelling figure to write about.
Because of her point of view and being so outspoken about it, did she have allies at the time? And if she did, who were they?
So she did have a few allies. One of them was another petticoat patriot named Mercy Otis Warren. She was our first historian of the American Revolution, and a woman at that. She was a playwright. She was quite a scholar. And Abigail and she had become good friends. And when she wrote John this Remember the Ladies letter, he responded to her letter as if she'd been joking. And he wrote her a very sort of funny missive that she did not find that funny. And we know this because she complained to Mercy Otis Warren, like, can you believe this? You know, he wasn't really taking me seriously at all. Maybe we should go and petition the government on behalf of ladies. Now, Mercy did not take her up on that because Mercy was really sort of a different kind of founding figure. I sometimes joke that she was the pick-me girl of the two. She thought that she was an extraordinary woman, which she was, but she wasn't quite sure, as sure as Abigail was, that all women were as qualified or ready to have, let's say, the franchise.
Wow, that's interesting that she was so she was similarly minded, but didn't have the conviction that Abigail did. Is what about Abigail made her so determined and convinced that she had a point of view that was unusual for the time, but so important?
Laura Camoy and I have thought about this a lot because you always think in terms of nurture and nature, right? And Abigail was the daughter of a parson. Her mother was relatively conservative lady. Her grandmother, Elizabeth Quincy, was a little more salty, and maybe she got some influence there. But Abigail seems to have come by this self-possession largely by nature. She decided early on that she wanted to learn to read, and so she would sneak up with her sisters into the parsonage's library and learn and sort of taunt her sisters into more intellectual discussions. And then she was so sort of carefree, she would often just like leave the house when she didn't want to deal with her mother's advice, that family relatives said that she was in danger of becoming a very bad woman. So I think we often land on the idea that it may have just been who Abigail was. She had this nature since childhood. She knew herself well because her family members were advising that she was going to need a very strong husband to keep her in hand. And Abigail decided she would much rather marry the short, stout, balding lawyer from Braintree because John Adams respected her opinions. And that was great because Abigail had a lot of opinions. She was very opinionated.
You know, but during that time, a person who was so outspoken, especially for a woman during that time, what were the dangers to her had things not gone her way? If she hadn't been able to navigate it so successfully, what were the dangers of the time? And did she face any of those?
I think if she had not married John Adams, she would have been in for a very difficult life. Husbands had all the rights over the women, and especially because women were not allowed to own property. Their husbands owned everything under the doctrine of coverture. And Abigail resented this all of her life. She kept bringing it up even when they were young. It would come up in her letters. And so I think if she had married a man different than John Adams, there would have been a lot of fighting. Divorce was not common then, so she would have been stuck in a marriage unhappily. Men could commit their wives to asylums. They could abandon them and leave them without financial resources. And there is an argument to be made that John kind of did abandon Abigail for many, many years. She was on her own, I think, a cumulative total of more than 10 years of their marriage while he was off doing the business of the country. And she was left to fend for herself. But what that shows me is that when she was by herself, she was entrepreneurial and she made the best of it. So maybe even in the worst circumstance, if she had been abandoned by a husband who did not care for her outspokenness, maybe she'd have done all right.
Well, I have no doubt. You know, I can name quite a few wives of male politicians who are, I would say, more capable of being leaders and would do a better job in the role. For whatever reason, they're not the politician or they're not in that particular position at the moment. I get the feeling that Abigail may have been a better president than her husband. I don't know. I'm no expert. I haven't done the research you've done, but it's just, you know, it crossed my mind. So what do you think she would have accomplished?
I think she would have been quite a decent president. I think she and John were a great partnership. He had many strengths she didn't have, and she had many strengths he didn't have. For example, he is famously cranky and cantankerous. And so a lot of their marriage is Abigail going around behind him cleaning up the social mess that he has made. But she's way more radical than John is. And so she's hot-headed. She will come to a position much quicker than he will. And with maybe a sharper, more judgmental point of view. John Adams, for all of his cantankerousness and for all of his, he would call himself a misanthrope. He didn't trust people. He was measured in a very strange way because he would write these letters. He'd vent his temper into a letter and rant and rave and say insane things. And then he'd lock that letter in a drawer and then go do the normal thing you're supposed to do for the country. Abigail had maybe a better temperament, but she was quicker to judge. And one example of this, she gave John Adams many good pieces of advice through their marriage. But one area in which she really steered him wrong, in our opinion, was with the Alien and Sedition Acts. She approved of them because she thought we were on the verge of war with France. She thought they were a necessary wartime measure, and that, of course, John would not abuse them. She had not really quite thought past, well, what might other presidents do with this power? And so she really encouraged him to sign these acts, which he was not very much in favor of. He did listen to her, he did sign them, and he bitterly regretted it because it became very unpopular during his administration. Many journalists were jailed under this act for saying very untrue things and sometimes very malicious things and sometimes kind of harmless things. And Abigail felt, I think, a little satisfaction to see these scoundrels get their comeuppances. But I think John realized pretty swiftly that this was going to tank his administration. Unfortunately, because of Abigail's advice, we are still arguing about the Alien and Sedition Acts to this day. So she did not do us a solid there.
That was something I was really interested in, the influence, the additional things that she had an influence on. But she was the mother of a president as well. So I'm interested, you mentioned a few things that she influenced for her husband. What influence did she have on her son and the choices that he made during his presidency and his political career?
So she did not live to see John Quincy become president, but she did live long enough to know that he would be president. He had been appointed Secretary of State, which at that point was the necessary stepping stone. Everybody who became Secretary of State at that point then became president. So she knew what his trajectory was. She gave him a lot of advice on his diplomatic career, on his marriage, how to raise his children, who he should trust, who he should not trust. And he definitely valued her opinion, but in the way of all children, I think sometimes really resented her meddling, mostly because she was kind of a nightmare as a mother-in-law. He married Louisa Catherine, and she was, in Abigail's opinion, a fine English lady, which was not a compliment. She thought Louisa had a delicate constitution and could not help out on the farm, and she would sort of passive-aggressively make sure that Louisa had a dish of milk before bed to make sure that she didn't get ill. And so I think John Quincy was absolutely shaped by his mother, and there is a quote attributed to him that says, "Everything I am is what my mother made me." But maybe there's a dark side to that too, because maybe he rebelled against some of her advice. For example, he was, like his father, famously independent as a congressman. He lost re-election in part because he thought that Thomas Jefferson was right about something, even though they were from different political parties. He thought, and this was the Louisiana Purchase, is where he supported Jefferson, even though the president didn't really have constitutional authority to purchase Louisiana, and Jefferson was being fairly hypocritical because Jefferson was usually a textualist who was saying if it's not in the Constitution, we can't do it. But Jefferson was also a forward-thinking political animal and thought, if I have the opportunity to double the United States, I'm going to do it, no matter how it makes me look. And John Quincy Adams supported him, which infuriated the Federalist Party and his mother.
So
His father understood.
let's go back to Abigail and her relationship. Tell us about the love story between those two.
It's a fun love story because if any of you know about romance tropes, this is kind of an enemies to lovers story. When they first met, she did not think much of John Adams, and he didn't like her either. He wrote in his diary that he didn't like her, and she recounts that he taunted her about how, well, she started taunting him because he was pompous, and she could never stand that, so she started needling him. And to get even with her, he criticized her habit of sitting cross-legged while reading a book and said, "That's not very ladylike." And she said, "Well, it's not very gentlemanly for you to concern yourself with the legs of a lady, is it?" Somehow, they found their way together. They fell in love. Her parents did not really approve, in part because she was from the Quincy's on her mother's side, and they were a very prominent family in Massachusetts. And he was an Adams. Who was that? He was maybe related to some maltsters in Boston. So they weren't impressed by his credentials, and her father was a little suspicious of him. But she held out. She was determined that she was going to marry this man, and so eventually her parents did give in, and they had their first child right away, like maybe 2 weeks early even. So the scandal. Oh, the scandal.
Well, now you're telling everybody, of course.
I know, yeah. So it was a love story, though, from start to finish, in that we see this marriage that lasts, I think it's 54 years. It's very largely happy, even though they have all these separations. And there is some strain on the marriage, which you will encounter in the novel, and I'll try not to spoil that for you.
Okay, we won't go there. Okay. So real-life historical figures, we often know sort of one-dimensionally this textbook version of them. But you have really done a lot of research, and that research, along with being thoughtfully written, can really lift somebody off the page into a fully dimensional person. Will you tell us about the research process and how you did this?
So the research process was sort of the same for most of our books, where we start with the secondary sources, the biographies, then we sort of immerse ourselves in the period. We'll watch all the movies, and which aren't always accurate, but they do get you in the right headspace. We listen to the music, and then we delve into the primary sources. And fortunately for all Americans, the National Archives has digitized and transcribed the letters of the Founding Fathers on a website called founders.archives.gov. And it's searchable. It's a searchable database, which is amazing. And it is annotated. So if, let's say, Abigail is referring to someone that you've never heard of, there's usually a footnote, and they will tell you who it is that she's speaking of. And those letters were an incredible resource and really the basis for the novels that we write. What we didn't have to do much for Abigail was enhance or modernize her prose as much as we might have to do with other figures, because she wrote in a very accessible way. She seemed to be speaking right to a modern audience, and she was very tart and funny. It was unexpected. She had lots of personality, and you know, sometimes she was clearly frustrating, but that only made her more fun to write about. Like, she was so controlling in the kitchen. She didn't want anyone else to make pies because they might burn the crusts or do something in a way that she didn't like. But she was self-aware enough to write. But of course, then I'm punished for my own vanity because then I have to do it all. So we really enjoyed that, and that helped us bring her character to life.
So was that the most surprising thing you learned about her, or was there something even more surprising in your research that you found out about her?
Okay, I'll tell you the most surprising thing.
Okay.
All right. The most surprising thing is that there was another man in Abigail's life, and it was not Thomas Jefferson, though she did seem to have a crush on him. While John Adams was away doing the business of the nation in Europe, he had a colleague, a forgotten founding father who is probably better off left forgotten, named James Lovell. And James, or maybe it's James Lovell, I'm not sure. Either way,
he doesn't
deserve to have his name pronounced properly. While John was away, he started flirting with Abigail. Now, if you've seen the Hamilton musical, you might know that Alexander Hamilton flirts with his sister-in-law by use of a comma. Well, James Lovell flirted with Abigail by use of an apostrophe and then went on to way cross the line with her. At first, Abigail sort of welcomed the admiration. This was flattering to her, especially since John was away and his letters were extremely rude at this particular juncture of their marriage, and her feelings were hurt, and this person is, you know, booing her up. But as the letters start to cross the line more and more and more, you see her start to withdraw and try to figure out how to manage this man, because she can't get away from him. He is her husband's colleague in Congress who gives her his paycheck, who controls what news she gets about her husband and her children who are overseas, who makes sure that her other children can be fed. He sometimes sends flour. So she has to figure out how to navigate this situation. And I remember Laura and I thinking, oh my God, Abigail Adams is having to deal with sexual harassment during the American Revolution. There is nothing new under the sun at all. And so eventually Abigail does, you know, she rises to the occasion and manages this. But I had never heard of this at all, and I was really shocked by it. So this is one of the many juicy tidbits that you will find in A Founding Mother.
There are a lot of them, too. Just sprinkled all the way through. If Abigail had been born in 1944 instead of 1744, what do you think she'd have done with her time on this earth?
I think she would have become Frances Perkins. Frances Perkins being, and I will die on this hill, the most important woman in American history, bar none. That's another book, Becoming Madam Secretary. Yes, you can clap for Frances. Yep. There's Becoming Madam Secretary. She was able to accomplish a great deal for the country, and I think Abigail absolutely would have put her powers to use. She was very interested in politics, very interested in social do-gooding, and she did as much in her lifetime as she could in her community. But if she'd been born in 1944, woo, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, and imagine 2044.
I know.
Yeah. So Abigail outlived a lot of her kids. what impact did that have on her, being that she was such a, I mean, being such being the kind of mother that she was?
Motherhood was really central to her whole life story. She had 6 children, 4 of whom lived to adulthood, and she survived all but 2, one of whom was sort of lost to her through alcoholism. And actually, 2 of them lost to her to alcoholism, which ran in their family as a genetic disease, which they didn't know about at the time, but they suspected. And you do see John Adams sort of ruminating in his letters, I think this might be a disease, and I would have spared my children of this if I could. It was crushing for her to lose so many children. And it was crushing for her to see before she died the danger that the United States Republic was in. We pick up the book. It opens during the War of 1812, which we don't think about much now because it passed quickly and we kept our independence. But at the time, it looked terrible. The British had invaded again. They burned Washington down. And so independence was on the line. John Adams would have, been considered a traitor again. So she thought she was watching yet another one of her children that she birthed, the young nation, also dying before her eyes. It was a very dark and depressing time for her. But what came out of it, of course, is that a new generation stepped up to the challenge. They took the torch. They defended the country, fended off the British, which is really a lesson for all of us that this country isn't just a machine where you flip the switch on and then it just moves forward evermore. It's something that requires the participation of ordinary men and women generation after generation to fight for that forward progress, to fight for the promise of the Declaration of Independence and the equality that it promises Americans. Abigail knew this, and she was thrilled to find out that the next generation stepped up, and her own son, John Quincy, was on the rise, and so she was able, before she died, to know that things might go right, and that she had done her part during her lifetime to advance matters, and that this would continue after her.
And she predeceased her husband.
Yes, she did. Yes,
So
she did,
how did
by
that
quite
have
a
an
bit.
impact on him?
John, I was shocked that, I had seen the HBO special, so I did know. But John Adams was older than Abigail by almost a decade, so it may not have made, I don't know what this is, but, okay. Okay.
Bad neighbors.
So she died of an illness, I believe it was typhus. Oh, shoot, I get this wrong. Typhus and typhoid fever are not the same thing. She died of one of them. If you turn to the back of the book, it says, please excuse my brain melting here, but it was an illness. And he was extremely distraught. He said that he wished that he could lay down next to her and die with her. But once she had gone, he treated it as if it was one of their long separations. Like maybe Abigail was off on a mission now and they would be reunited soon. And in his retirement without Abigail, he has a wonderful flourishing of his relationship with Thomas Jefferson, which has been repaired. And they famously died within hours of each other on the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. So that was a sort of sweet ending for him, which maybe wouldn't have come about if Abigail was around, because I don't know that she ever really forgave Thomas Jefferson.
Is there anything about the book that I haven't asked you that you want the audience to know?
Oh, gosh. I think this is what I want the audience to know. We wrote this book knowing that it was going to come out during the 250th anniversary year of the Declaration of Independence. We also knew that in a period of political polarization that we have right now, which Abigail would not be a stranger to, that people were going to have a lot of complicated feelings about the Declaration, and what the country's mission is, and whether or not it still has a mission, and whether or not we have a part in it. And there's a lot of people in this country who might not see themselves in this national project. And we were thrilled that Abigail gets to speak directly to us about that project and about that mission, and does not hold back. And she is the perfect voice to make you feel better and to make sense of what you might be feeling about this anniversary. And so we're so thrilled to be able to tell her story and to have those conversations in this very important year, because this country belongs to all Americans.
You know, I think there are probably quite a few folks in the audience who consider you their favorite author. And people want to know about the lives of those people who write those stories that engage them. So will you tell us about how you became a writer, like what a typical day is like, how you found Laura as your writing partner for so many of these books?
I will, and I will make it sound much more interesting than it actually is, because I am
'Cause you're a storyteller.
I am super boring. Yeah.
No.
So I didn't know that I was going to become a writer. I actually thought I was going to become a lawyer, and I went to law school and I practiced law for like 10 minutes before I decided it was not for me.
That was a quick case.
It was a very quick case, and there may be lawyers here, so I apologize for this mean joke I'm about to tell. But I
Should
tell
I save
this
you from
joke.
yourself?
Yeah, I tell this joke that if I was going to lie for a living, I'd rather write fiction. I know, it's really below the belt. It is. I know.
They're still with you.
So I originally I was on my honeymoon with my husband, and I picked up a book in an airport called The Memoirs of Cleopatra by Margaret George. I don't know if any of you have read it. It's amazing. If you've never heard of Margaret George, shame on you. She's a goddess. Her book was amazing. My husband was very annoyed that I was so absorbed in this book on our honeymoon. But it was about Cleopatra, and also at the end of the book, I found out that she'd had a daughter who had become a queen in the ancient world, and was very fascinating. And I thought, why don't we know her? Is it because she was really good at her job and didn't have to commit suicide like her mother? And that sort of stuck in my mind, like, maybe why do we only hear about the sort of tragic cases of female leadership? And so I really became obsessed that I wanted to tell the story of Cleopatra Selene, and that, of course, became my mission to remember the ladies, as Abigail might say, and so I've been doing that ever since. Now, at some point, probably after my third Cleopatra book, I've been friends with Laura Camoy. We were both members of a writers' organization in Maryland. We got to be good friends. And we were at a conference together, and Laura at that time was still teaching history at the U.S. Naval Academy, and she was teaching classes on Thomas Jefferson. And I told her, oh my God, I would love to write about Thomas Jefferson, but I've been writing in the ancient world. I really don't have the expertise of the subject matter for American history yet. And she had never written historical fiction before, so we thought maybe we could team up. But what would we possibly write about Thomas Jefferson? Everything's been written about him. Except we thought, well, we know him as a founding father. We don't know anything about him as a father. What were his daughters like? So we went back to my hotel room. We raced back to my hotel room, tippity-tapped on the computer, started researching things, got really excited by everything we found. And there was no alcohol involved here. We were just high on history. We decided then and there that we were going to write a book about Patsy Jefferson, which became America's first daughter, and that we were going to write it together. And I will say that it was a lot of hubris, because we had never collaborated before with anybody, much less each other. It could have gone really terribly. It didn't. We had a lot of fun and decided to do it again with Dray Hamilton, and now again in A Founding Mother. And it's been a really fruitful partnership, and we speak a lot of the same sort of writerly language. I wish I could tell you that I had a really orderly writer routine. I do not. I start out every morning that way. I think, I'm going to have my coffee on the deck. I'm going to watch the birds sing, and then I'm going to have my laptop, and I'm going to have this beautiful, creative, uninterrupted time, and then maybe I'll have time for the pool in the afternoon. These are the fantasies that writers have. That's not reality. By the time I have, my coffee and I've sat down, didn't even get to the deck, there's something that has happened. There are actual writer emergencies. The publisher needs this, or somebody on social media is causing a ruckus that has to be dealt with right away, or, oh my God, I forgot this research tidbit in this book that I have to fix this chapter before it goes to print. There's always something, and so my writing process is complete chaos.
Thank you for sharing. So I think we're at the point where if you have any questions, I think we have a question already. Yes.
Hit me.
Please.
All right. Thank you.
We can hear you.
I've got to give a shout out again to Becoming Madam Secretary. In addition to this, you've got to read it. It's fantastic, about Frances Perkins, as I told Stephanie Dray already. I'd like to know, so 1776 is my all-time favorite Broadway musical. You referenced Hamilton.
Yeah.
What do they get right in in that play, in other places, other than your book? Who tells the story well and who gets it wrong?
So there's a number. So I do not hold musicals or films to complete accuracy, because they're all historical fiction. They're trying to tell a story and make it entertaining and fun. And 1776 has a great number in it where Abigail is harassing John about pins, right? And the first time I saw this, I was like, why is she bugging him? He is trying to write the Declaration of Independence with Thomas Jefferson. He does not need to be dealing with pins. What I didn't know is that she's asking him for pins because he has left her at home with no money, and she has decided to start a business. She is going to sell those pins, which she often sold for 10 times the purchase price that he could send them to her for. And this became the origin of her quote-unquote pin money. You might have heard that phrase. She turned this little enterprise of selling pins into her personal business. She began a mercantile business where she was selling gloves and hats and scarves, and she was so successful at this that she was eventually able to invest in securities and land, and that is how the Adamses actually emerged from the war relatively financially stable, even though most other families were financially ruined by the end of the war. So 1776 doesn't lay that all out, but they got that right. Yes. Now, if you've seen Hamilton, John Adams gets maybe like one line in there. It says, "Welcome to the Adams administration," and then skips right over it. There's a reason for that, because the Adams administration was not Alexander Hamilton's finest moment. And so if I were writing that musical, I would skip over it too.
Another question? Yes, I think we have one over here.
Thank you. I too loved your book about Madam Secretary. It was fabulous. But I was wondering why Anna Rosenberg didn't even get a mention.
Because she was a rival to Frances Perkins, and I thought that would be quite distracting. And if I have to choose between the two, I'm picking Frances Perkins every time. So Anna Rosenberg can just be quiet, sit down. She can be in someone else's book.
Thank you. And here's a question right here. The front row is winning, y'all. We got to get some hands up.
Thank you, because Abigail has been my personal heroine since I was about 5 years old. So any mention of Abigail, and I'm like, oh, my Abby. I am a 144, and I'm wondering where you come down on. And for everyone else, I am an amateur historian. I volunteer at the Belmont Paul House in Washington, D.C. for women's rights. And so suffrage is in a split. Does it start with Remember the Ladies, and then it takes from Abigail to suffrage passage 144 years? That's where I fall, because it's Abby. And then other folks go with the Declaration of Sentiments. And I didn't know if you had an opinion on that.
So I know there are a lot of historians that really discount Abigail Adams as a feminist heroine, in part because the language of feminism as a movement didn't exist. It comes about later. And there aren't a lot of women talking about suffrage during Abigail's time. But she does talk about it. She notices that, and this is totally true, totally shocking. In the 1776 Constitution of New Jersey, women and black people could vote. This was taken away from them later. So within Abigail's lifetime, she's seeing that there had been progress, but it could be clawed back. And she had said that if she could vote, she would. So did she go out, waving signs for women's suffrage? No. But was this on her mind? It was. And even better, she had kind of planted it a bit in John Adams's mind. He never made any strides to improve women's rights during his administration. But I was surprised to find in a number of his letters with compatriots, they'd bring something up like, who should vote? And he'd say, do we have to think about whether women should vote? And I know who put that thought there. It sounds horrible, and it is, that the founders did not include everyone. And there's a great line in the Ken Burns special, which if you've seen it, it's great, about the American Revolution, where the founders are thinking, well, what if everybody can vote? And John Adams says, oh, God. And it's funny, and it makes him seem terrible, but the context to remember is that there had never been in the whole history of the world a republic where everyone voted. It never happened. And the more people voted, the more direct democracies that there were, they often, in John Adams's opinion, would commit suicide. And so he always was looking for a way to sort of protect the republic and not let it fall into chaos. And so it's not shocking that he's thinking in anti-democratic terms, even while trying to create a democratic republic. Long-winded answer. All right.
I mean, we've got a question back here and then one over here. There's a microphone coming so we can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I look forward to reading the book. I read David McCullough's 2001 biography of John Adams, in which Abigail appears prominently, and I'm just wondering if that was part of your research.
Absolutely. David McCullough is the master. Yeah. It's great. And it was the basis of the HBO special as well, which I'm a great fan of. And you might be interested to know that we were always asked to write about Abigail, and we always said no, because we were great fans of the the HBO special, which stars Laura Linney. And we were like, we can't compete with Laura Linney. She's a national treasure. But eventually we realized that as well as Abigail does come off in McCullough and in the HBO special, there's lots of years where we don't see her because we're following John, rightfully so, and we really wanted to explore what she was doing when he was away, which turns out to be a whole heck of a lot.
Thank you. And I think we have a question right here and one here. Okay. We'll get you next.
All right. I'll hurry.
No, there. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Over here.
I'm looking at
Okay.
Okay.
It's okay. There's time for everybody, I think.
You touched briefly on your writing process, but several of your books are written with Laura Camoy.
Yes.
How do you divide the labor? How do you merge it? It comes out beautifully in one voice. When I read My Dear Hamilton, I went back to the cover and said, whoa, it's two authors. And I have read other books written by more than one author that read like they're written by committee. and yours just flows so beautifully. So how do you get the right work together on the research and the writing to get to that point?
Well, thank you. The question is about how Laura and I divide the work when we write together. The process has really changed each book that we write. America's First Daughter, we were so new at it that we literally had like a Google Chat video open, and we'd be sitting at our own desks and reading the books and writing. Like I might be writing chapter 1 and she might be writing chapter 2, and we would be reading and say, oh, this is good for your chapter, and switch. And then we would switch the chapters and edit freely. And that part has survived, the editing freely, because we speak largely the same writer language, and so we mostly just in track changes, if any of you have used that. We mostly just say accept all because whatever the other person has done is fine or good or better than what we had originally intended. And so by the end of the process, ideally, both of us have touched every page in the manuscript. With My Dear Hamilton, we then sort of switch from every other chapter to big chunks. And I always laugh and say, even though I have told my share of chapters with gross stuff in it, I do not like the gross chapters. So, and Laura loves the gross chapters. So I'm like, oh, dysentery, all of you. Not true. I did deal with dysentery. But in general, that's so. And also sometimes when it comes to sort of the sappier chapters, Laura really likes those hallmark moments, whereas I like to hurt you and make you cry. And so, I'll be like, oh, it's happy. Go ahead, Laura. It's all yours. So sometimes that's how we divide up the work. Yep.
Another question? I think I saw a hand over here at one point, but maybe no. Anyone? There's one right there.
Oh, what am I working on next? I can tell you what I am working on next. I can't tell you what Laura and I are working on next because it has not yet been approved by the publisher. However, we think we gave them an excellent idea. They are worried that people might not like it or be interested. So, as ammunition, we have been polling all the audiences in our tour that we've been doing so you guys can contribute here. Who would you want Laura and I to write about next?
Do you have any hints?
Call it out. Any founding mother, for chance? No? Shy audience. Dolly Madison? Anyone else? Martha Jefferson, Jefferson's wife. Okay, anybody else? And it doesn't have to be founding mother. Martha Washington. Okay. I'm putting these down in my votes that I'm keeping a tally of to provide evidence for my publisher. I will say that one of you did name the person that we want to. Yes.
Good work. Good job.
Yeah, good job. So what I am writing about personally is kind of funny. I know I'm not generally known for humor, but I can be funny. My next novel came about because I stumbled over a little strange factoid that in the 1930s, Mussolini in Italy tried to ban pasta. In Italy, right? Crazy. Absurd. Absolutely absurd. And all the little old Italian grandmas came out of their kitchen like, now he's gone too far. And
that was the line.
Yeah, that was it. And my family is originally from Italy, in a little town called Celano up in the mountains, but it's overlooking these fields where most of the grain for pasta in Italy is made. And that made me think about how my family and their relatives would have reacted to this, because pasta becomes a symbol of fascist resistance throughout Italy. So this means not just that I'm going to write a really fun book about this, but also that whenever you are eating pasta and you are worried about the calories or anything else, just remember that you are fighting tyranny and that pasta is good. It's righteous. Never let anyone tell you different. Enjoy your pasta and enjoy my book.
Thank you. Do we have time for another question? We have time for one more question, and I saw a hand over here in the red.
It's okay. What are you reading right now? What am I reading? Okay, I'm going to confess something. I love audiobooks, really love them, because it means that I can get more books in while I'm not at my desk. And I'm reading my own audiobook for A Founding Mother because I want to hear how it's being performed. And Cassandra Campbell does an amazing job. And some of these words come back in a different way than I expected them when I wrote them. So that's a lot of fun. But I also just finished the book It Girl by Alison Pataki, actually. And that is about Evelyn Nesbit, who was a 20th century sort of superstar. She was like the Taylor Swift of her day. And so that was a really good read.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Stephanie Dray, for coming to talk with us.